No. So, my talk is, what is my talk? Is your soul pot-bound? Is your soul pot-bound? Well, I was working off the biblical new wine in old wineskins. Doesn't work. But I've been sober for 38 years. And I just I couldn't use that example well. So I thought about it and I went, this is a perfect example to have for you because this is my little plant. This is going to be a live demonstration here. This plant sits in my family room along with 3 other plants that are in pots like this. And I really like this pot. It's kind of attractive, right? Well, every time I go to water this poor fella, can you see what's going on here? And I kind of feel guilty about it, but at the same time, I really like this pot. And so in order to do the right thing by this little guy, what would I have to do? Yes, I would have to repot him. So I'm going to do that before your very eyes. I didn't think it was right to rip the roots out twice. So anyway, we're going to see what happens here. See, it's very messy. Note to self. Repotting is very messy. Okay. And look at the roots. Notice they kind of spin around themselves, don't they? They kind of circle around the pot, and we don't even know if there's any soil in that other part of the pot. Okay, so I'm repotting this little guy. Let's see. This is really going to be messy here, but okay, so he's going to be happy in a couple of days. Maybe not right away. He's going to need a little more soil. Anyway, so that was my demonstration. But I think you might get the picture. Do you get the picture? Yes. Yeah, the pot. It wasn't even one pot that was holding this poor little fella. It was 2 pots. It was my attachment to this beautiful pot, and even the story of who gave me this pot. Lots and lots of kind of story in the pot. Notice that? So, okay. I can't wipe my hands on my pants. You see, if I had my jeans on, I'd just go like, no, I'm fine. So, is your soul pot-bound? I was thinking too, soil, but I didn't really want to mess with that. It was kind of fun to play with it in my head, but I thought, no, this is about your soul. And I think it's important for us to understand soul in a unity context because, David, thank you so much. They're even wet, isn't that nice? So we think of soul as like, his soul left his body when somebody passed away, like it, floated away. That there's this sort of collective sense of soul as being the eternal part of who we are. I don't know. How does that sound like? That you kind of have that sense of soul? But my experience of Charles Fillmore and the teachings of unity give me a different understanding of soul. And so I wanted to go back and look and see if what I've been feeling around soul is what Fillmore talks about. And I found this idea that Fillmore understands the soul as the realm of our consciousness. The soul is the realm of our consciousness. It's the place where spirit becomes our lived experience. It's our soul that connects in with all there is in God. And when I used to be part of Unity in Marin, my minister, I remember very early on, this was in the early 90s, he used to say to us, your soul is pivotal. And I'm like, what? And the idea was that there's an aspect of us and I want to call it our consciousness. There's an aspect of us that in any moment can turn to higher consciousness, can turn to superconscious, can turn to divine mind, or we can turn to the pot. You know, we can turn to what's going on in the outer. So this aspect of us that can turn to something bigger than who we are, or it can turn to something in the relative world, that is our soul. And I'd like to see this idea of our soul being like a container. Consciousness is kind of like, it's like a container. And that's why my idea is that has your soul really outgrown the pot that you're living in? You know, the soul being the pot. The soul is the container that you're living in. And for many of us, you know, we're kind of like the roots. We're circling around again and again in the same small container. You know, my friend Jim Roseberg, he talks a lot about this, and he talks about the idea that Jesus spoke about wine and wineskins. In Luke, this is the parable from Jesus. No one tears a piece from a new garment and sews it onto an old garment. Otherwise, the new will be torn, and the piece from the new won't mesh into the old. And no one puts new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the new wine will burst the skins and will be spilled, and the skins will be destroyed. But new wine must be put into fresh wineskins. And no one, after drinking old wine, desires new wine, but says, the old is good enough. So, such a powerful thing for us to begin to understand, this idea that there are containers that we hold, and when we begin to think of the container, not as something outside ourselves, but as the consciousness that we're holding, the consciousness of what we're holding can be holding a lot of old wine. It can be root-bound, because we've been holding that level of consciousness, that quality of consciousness. And by that I mean the quality of the connection that we have to the presence of God, to the presence of the divine, to that which is greater than this moment, than anything that's in the realm of the physical. Jim Roseberg, in this little book that I'm hoping all of you will get, the little book of big questions about prayer, he uses this metaphor of new wine and old wineskins throughout the whole book with each question that he asks, because it's very clear that a lot of our understanding of spirituality, our understanding of what is prayer, is based on some old wineskin or some very small pot that we maybe grabbed onto, a level of consciousness that may have been ours when we were young children. And clearly, the message in the New Testament that Jesus gives us is not to understand a God that was out there, right? It's not about duality. We talked about that a couple weeks ago, that our prayers are not about begging God to do something, asking permission, begging, borrowing, beseeching, because the realm of consciousness is out there, but rather the understanding that the presence and power is always within us. So powerful. And, I love synchronicities, and it happens for me so often when I'm focusing on an idea and a talk, and I was focusing on this wineskin, new wine, new ideas, new ways of showing up in the world, and old wineskins. And I got an email from the man who writes for Truth Unity, and I think some of you, I've talked to you about Truth Unity. It's a place online, truthunity.net, where most of the old Unity books are available to us as PDFs, and a lot of old talks and things. And the thing he sent last week was from my friend Eric Butterworth, the minister that I've been speaking a lot about, who was at Lincoln Center. And his whole message was about new wine in old wineskins. And he said, we have a new insight into truth. We may be putting new wine into old wineskins. And his insight was simply the thing that we say every single week, which is there's one presence and one power. It's vast and expansive. And it's in you and it's in me. It's who we are. But the old way in the world was not this at all. It was about a God that was outside of us. And I believe, and I can only say this in my own experience, I was raised in the Congregational church and I sang in the choir, so I heard a lot of sermons, and I think, they went in and out. But I was very much raised even though I speak about a God that's here, there's all this old energy in my pot, in my consciousness, that still acts and speaks as if there's some force outside that's supposed to do it for me or stop doing it for me. And I can, and how long I've been doing this for 30 years, and I've been not trying to not be honest, but I realized the more I felt into this, I realized that it's not an easy leap for most of us collectively. We live in that consciousness all the time. Even more so, we live in the material consciousness, which is even farther away for even thinking there's a great presence out there, right? So it's a powerful thing for us to begin to be aware of. And I wanted to read something from Rosemurgey's book before we'll look at a few ways where we might have some Potbound activity happening in our life. Basically, how he runs each chapter is he'll ask a question, how much faith is enough? And then he'll go through the old wine about, what is faith and kind of the old teaching. And then he comes to what he calls the sword. Jesus said, I come not to bring peace, I come to bring a sword. And the sword is not a sword of war out there. It's an aspect within us that allows us to cut away the things that no longer serve us. And it can cause conflict. It is messy. This is not one of those, I got that message, I'm on it, away we go. This whole understanding of the presence and power that lives in us, and to be able to speak from that place, not only about my life, but to speak that way about your life. And that's part of what our chaplains are doing for us. It's very powerful. So I want to read a little piece from the new wineskin in this chapter, because what he does is the new wineskin is Jim Rosemurgey sitting in the silence and revealing what Spirit says to him in that moment. He's all about whatever you're praying for, it's praying for a bigger consciousness. It's praying for a bigger pot. It's praying for a more expanded consciousness of the presence. The presence. The presence that each one of us, that we are that presence. He says, your prayers can embody Jesus' statement, believe that you have received it. Your prayers can affirm it is done, but your words are not prayer, and they do not make anything happen. Darn. We want that to happen, don't we? Yeah. Your prayer practice, whatever it may be, is you seeking a consciousness through which it is done. A consciousness where illness cannot exist and you are whole. A consciousness where there is no lack and you see the circle that is giving and receiving. A consciousness where there is no indecision and you make no choices. Instead, a light shines and you know what to do. A consciousness of strength when you rise after you fall, and a consciousness where there is no anxiety, only peace. Very powerful. Very powerful. That's why I think it was you, John Paul, last week or a couple weeks ago. He said, "I know you said there was one thing we need to pray about, but I think I fell asleep. What was it?" I'm calling you out because he's leaving and he's going to lead a song later. So he's not going to be on me because he's leaving, right? but it was perfect because all he talked about is we pray for a deeper connection. We pray for that consciousness of the presence of the divine within us. That's what it is. That's what the one prayer that he's talking about. Doesn't mean we don't have conversations, that we don't think about it, that we don't go about our lives. But it's very, very powerful for us to think about. One of the things that I really loved about kind of looking at this was looking at the different containers that we have, the different pots where we get pot-bound. And I thought, thinking about just in my own life, I can often get kind of caught up in the pot that's about aging. Anybody else do that? It's like, well, maybe because I'm getting older, my life is getting smaller. The things that I used to do, I don't do. I'm not reaching out as much. I've had my best years. This is just the kind of thing that happens when you get older. Don't you hate it when that happens? When you think that to yourself, and maybe when you hear somebody else say it, you're like, really? Because you're so unity, and you want to, well, we all have that little bit of attitude. It's not nice, but it's there. But, we just think we know, but then we're the ones who are doing it, right? We really, I'm too old, my best years are behind me. Not. Take her workshop next week. You'll get really energized by that. But that's kind of one of the little pots we can get in, right? Also, our health thing can be really, really bad. I have to share, I was in that car, people who've known me for a while know I was in a car accident in December of 2023. And all that time of doing physical therapy and going to the chiropractor and getting better and trying to get my balance back and all, in the background, there's been a lawsuit around it because the guy that hit me didn't have any insurance. And it was not a big lawsuit. It's not like I'm going to be a millionaire or anything like that. The lawyer, of course, made a bit more money. But it got settled on Friday in a mediation. And I have to tell you, it was just like, I don't have to think about that anymore. It was, but it wasn't like something that was there, but it was there all the time, It was like I was holding that container. And it didn't matter. It was never about the money. It was just like once I started down this road, I can't stop. So we create these little containers, these pots, these wines, these Boda bags. Anybody ever had one of those when you're skiing? I had one. But I don't have it anymore. I would have maybe showed it to you. What about our identity? Do you know any people? I have this woman, I totally love her. Her excuse for being annoying to everyone is that she's a Capricorn. I'm like, that doesn't give you permission to be rude. She never likes how anybody organizes things. And she'll come up to me, we're in a group of doing things. She's like, oh, I can't believe she didn't, but that's just my Capricorn nature. I'm like, yeah, right. But we do that kind of thing, right? Right? And maybe yours isn't Capricorn. I'm Aquarian, so I have no excuse for being totally out there. But we do these things about ourselves. Oh, that's just the way I am. I get angry. Hello? Get your pot a little bit bigger and find out what's going on for you here. So that whole identity thing, I think, is an important thing for us to take a look at, especially as we age, because some of the identities that we had, like my mom identity is not the same as my mom identity was when my kids were living with me. And even now, as they're not living with me, it's kind of changing. So, and when we had a job, we had an identity, and then if we retired or we shifted, that identity changed. And we carry around a lot of the containers that held the truth or untruth about those identities. So it's really important for us to kind of take a look and see what's going on. I had a couple containers. I made kind of a fun list of some of these. So here's one that there isn't enough. Yeah. This is just who I am. Take a look. I just have to keep being who I've always been. Oh, here's a good one. Because my body has changed, my life has become smaller. Yeah. Smaller. Like you take smaller steps. I saw that somewhere. Like when you're old, you need to like stress. Don't go like this. You know, people are going to think you're old. I was on YouTube. Yeah, it made me stand up more straight. You know, I thought that was a good thing. I cannot let this go. Now that is one that I think we really need to look at the pot on that one, the forgiveness pot, where we have something that we're holding on to, some little tiny thing somebody did to us. You know, maybe it was an ex-husband who no longer is alive, and we are drinking the poison in the nails of that experience every day, and that person doesn't feel it anymore. Most of the time that's what happens, right? We're drinking poison expecting someone else to die. That's the whole saying of that one. But forgiveness, it churns us up inside. And how does being resistant, angry, upset help your soul to expand your consciousness and connect you more deeply with the presence of God? How does that work? I don't think it does. It contracts us. It contracts us. So I want to share one last thing that I really enjoyed about Jim Rosenberg. Would you open your bag, Meg, for me, and pull out the one thing, not the thing that's wrapped, but the other thing? Yeah. Yes. So one of the things that he uses as a metaphor in his book, which I thought was really great, this is purple for Susan, because Susan loves purple. She's dressed in purple. And because we have purple chairs, what he talked about was the metaphor that the wax of a candle is God. That the wax of the candle is God. And the wick of the candle is each one of us. And there's plenty of wax, but without a wick, there's no light. So this idea that you are the light of the world is about really, really tending the wick, being aware of the truth of who you are, lighting your candle with all there is of God. It's about being in that deep connection with the presence and power. So that's what we're really inviting everyone into, you know, over the next couple of months, actually, through the end of September. We're inviting you into this journey with, sorry about that. I've got the little booklet right here. This journey of 40 days of prayer. One page where you can sit in your prayer time, your meditation time, and have a gentle read. Sometimes there's a reflection for you. But for us to really deepen our awareness of this consciousness and presence of the divine, that not only do we live and move and have our being in it, we are of it. The divine is who we are. And as we deepen that, it becomes much more easy to make decisions in life about what's the next thing for me to do. What am I to speak or not to speak? Because we're coming from that place of consciousness that's expanded more deeply into the presence of God. So I invite you now, let's take a moment. Here, Meg, I'll give this back to you. Let's take a moment and close our eyes. Just invite you to settle into your body. Taking in a couple deep breaths, breathing in that living spirit, the spiritus, the prana, the energy, the divine vitality, energizing the physical body, and connecting us deeply with within and without with the presence. You know, prayer doesn't convince God, doesn't convince Spirit to do anything new. Prayer allows consciousness. Prayer allows our consciousness to become spacious enough to recognize what God has always been doing. Prayer doesn't convince God to do anything new. Prayer allows consciousness to become spacious enough to recognize what God has always been doing. So take a moment and consider, is there a place in your life where you're pot-bound, where the roots can't really grow anymore, they're circling around? Perhaps it's a belief system that you keep carrying. Perhaps it's some quality, a temperament, or a situation that you keep circling in that doesn't seem to change. Like an old wineskin, that container is keeping you contained and small. And are you ready? Are you ready to allow the new wine, the more spacious connection to Spirit, a deeper connection with the God in your being, to be fully present in your life? As your eyes and your ears listening to the small voice, the quiet whisper, or the nudge that calls you to take the next action or refrain, to speak or to be silent, but to know that you are one. So feeling into your life right now, taking some time in the stillness. Is there something you're willing to break out of? A place where you're feeling your soul is pot-bound. Let the presence be with you now. The new wine is the living presence, alive and active in our lives. The wineskin is our consciousness. The pot is our consciousness. And those roots, those are those habitual patterns of consciousness. The messy part, the repotting, is the experience of awakening to the truth of who we are. we do that awakening moment by moment, breath by breath, when we open ourselves to the power and the presence of the divine. So as you're ready, begin to bring your awareness back into your physical body, taking in a deep breath, giving gratitude for the body you got this go round. And as you feel guided, you could gently come back and open your eyes.